Okay, the problem we have here today, we have a 2007 Dodge Durango, and the problem with it is when you turn off the ignition, it's not dieseling, you know, like there's more combustion in the chamber, but it's just like you don't take the key out at all, or it's like you know, it's still running normally. Okay, see, go ahead and take the key out, and if you can hear that, go ahead and pop the hood, and I'll show everyone that the engine is still running. It's a 4.7 liter engine, Dodge Durango 2007 edition. Put that stand up there, and as you can hear, and as you can see on that serpentine belt right there, this engine is still running. And look what we have right here, the keys. So what are we going to do today? We are going to put an ignition switch into the key, or we are going to put an ignition switch into the steering column and replace the old one. Now, a lot of people get the ignition switch mixed up with the ignition cylinder. See, the cylinder and the tumblers are right here. Now, the ignition switch, which we got a $40 part at AutoZone, is this right here, and it goes underneath this housing right here. And I didn't really see any other videos on YouTube doing this, so that's what we're going to do today, folks. We are going to do a step-by-step as we replace the ignition switch inside of this 2007 Dodge Durango. Okay, what I have to do now is pop the hood once more, which is right here. Can you see that?
Not really. I see your hand, but not the latch.
This is the latch. You pop the hood, and then I'm gonna go out here. I'm gonna move my part off of there, and I have to turn the car back off. So if you want to turn your car off and you have the key out, there's plenty of ways to do it. I wouldn't take off the alternator wire. Instead, you can open up your fuse box, and the fuel pump is this one, number 18. Now watch, give it a few seconds and the fuel pump will stop working and it turns off. Voila, just like that. And then I'm gonna put the fuel pump fuse back in, and then I'll just close that up. And then we are ready to get started. Let me put the hood down on this. Okay, the first thing you need is to buy this part from AutoZone. It is roughly $38 plus tax. It's an ignition switch. It's LS 1431. It's a Duralast. Make sure you get the right part and you tell them exactly what kind of Dodge Durango you have. In my case, it was a 2007 4.7 liter engine. Here's what the ignition switch looks like. Not much to it, really. Okay, now we are ready for the next step. Okay, as you can see here, this is the battery. The very first thing you want to do is to disconnect the battery terminal cables. Just disconnect those so that you won't have any problems with the electrical components inside of your car. Okay, we are now ready for the next step. First, underneath the steering wheel, there is a screw in the upper left corner of this plastic housing. You're going to need a Torx 20 bit to get the screw off. You take that screw out. Next, the button that tilts the steering wheel, there is a screw in it in the back. You take that screw out, and once the screw comes out, the plastic lever is going to be able to come right off, and you pull it just straight off, just like that. It's really easy. And make sure you are putting these things in a place that you know where it's at. Next step is you kind of bend down and you look underneath the steering wheel, and there are two, let's see if you can see this, there are two places for screws. You're going to need a Torx 20 under here too. Make sure you have a long, slender tool, because some of the screws are up in there pretty far. So you want to be able to reach those two screws in order to be able to take this plastic housing off your steering wheel. Because if not, you won't be able to reach the screws, and it'll give you an aggravating time, to say the least. But you got to get these two screws off, and that's what I'm doing here. And it takes me a few minutes, but I get it. Okay, as you can see, I'm taking out the screw. And getting ready to use a bigger or a longer screwdriver for the other side, because the second screw is actually farther up. The first screw isn't in there very far. The second one, however, is a little farther, goes a little farther up, and you want to make sure you have that long, slender screwdriver. Other than that, it won't give you a problem. Okay, the next step, this is what I'm showing you here that you need, the long, slender screwdrivers, either with a big bit or a slender slender shaft to the screwdriver, in order to make sure they fit. Because see, look, on a regular screwdriver, you see it just won't fit up in the plastic holes. See, this is what I'm showing you here. So you definitely want to make sure you get the right size. Okay, next step, you take the rubber piece that's connected to the gear shifting arm, and you just pull it up to the end, and now the top of the plastic enclosure is ready to just lift off. And here, this is a top view. And then now, secondly, the bottom part of the plastic enclosure just pulls right off. Again, make sure any screws that you have, you know where you're putting them. Kind of keep track of these in your mind so you do not lose them. Now, here's a view of underneath the steering wheel of what it looks like. Be sure not to unplug any of those from the steering wheel, as the yellow one was to the airbag. Now right here, what I'm showing you is the part we're going to replace. That is actually the ignition switch right there. Okay, one of the next steps you want to do is unplug the wiring harness to the ignition switch. It just kind of like pulls right off of there, and you set that out of the way. Now we have to get back under the steering column. Again, do not unplug any of these plugs right here, because one is to the airbag, and that would be a nightmare to have to reset that. So do not touch those. Now, you see the part where there's the steering mechanism where you can tilt the steering wheel? There are 2 screws in that metallic bracket. And what you're going to have to do is you go ahead and use the same Torx 20 screwdriver, and you start taking off those 2 screws to that metal bracket. And I'm trying to get you a decent view, which is hard to do, of those 2 screws. But I go ahead and start taking these 2 screws off. Again, I'm sorry about the view here. I know it's not perfect, but it's kind of hard to get to with the camera. I'll try to show you a better view here again here in just a second. Taking off those 2 screws, and after you get these 2 screws off, the little metal piece that holds the lever that tilts the steering wheel will just kind of come down a little bit. You'll see here in just a second. There's 1 screw, and remember, put the screws where you know exactly where they are. And I'm trying to show you a little bit better view so you can actually see these screw holes here. See, there's where the first screw was, and right here's where the second one is. And the second one, you know, these are no problem, and these come out pretty easily. And you just see, just like that, and then the lever switch just pulls down, just kind of falls down really, and you just leave it hanging there. And then underneath you're going to see the ignition switch. There's 2 screws holding that in, and what you want to do, you want to go ahead and start taking those off. And once you get these 2 screws off, the ignition switch itself will be ready to be removed. And it has a plastic little tab that's going over that piece of metal there that you just kind of pull back and just pull it out. It's pretty easy. You'll see here in just a second as I take out this last screw here. See, you just kind of pull down on that tab and you just pull out, and voila, there's the old ignition switch. And you kind of want to put the new ignition switch on in the exact same way you took off the old one. You want to line it up, because you have to line it up to this metal cylinder where the old one came off. But it's real easy to line up. Just pay attention to exactly how the old one came off and line it up accordingly. And then you push it in, and then the ignition switch is pretty much in there. Now, then what you want to do is you want to do everything in the exact reverse order that I've done and taken everything apart. I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 screws into the ignition switch. And another thing that you want to do after this is to reset the security fuses onto your car. Because once you've hooked up the wiring harness in the steering wheel back to your ignition switch, remember that little wire plug that we took off a while ago? You want to make sure that's reconnected and then you reconnect your battery. And before you put it all back together, once you reconnect your battery, see, I'm reconnecting the wiring harness. And I'm getting ready to reconnect the tilt lever to the steering wheel. You just kind of line it up to the bolt holes or the screw holes, and you screw that in there. But before I put it all back together, before you guys put it all back together, what you should do is really check out the ignition switch to make sure that this takes care of your problem. So I'm showing you the old ignition switch, and then there's the new one. Okay, here is the security fuse that you want to reset. When you have the key pushed over and you hear the dinging in your car, there is this fuse is right here in the compartment on the driver's side door. You want to pull them out. They have these little clips that they pull right out, and then you push it back in. This resets the security system in your car, and then you just cover over the compartment with its lid, and then you are ready for the big test. You start it, and then you turn it off. Now this should turn off your vehicle, and you can see as I go around through here to show you guys. I showed you earlier that the belts were moving, and you can clearly see they're not moving anymore, that this has worked. Okay guys, everything is done now, and you put everything back together in the opposite order that I took it apart. I hope this video has helped you. Please subscribe to my channel and smash the like button, and I will see you guys later.